Hey there, TikTakers! Today we collect some of the love-hate relationships of Jeff the Killer. What would Jeff's story be without characters like Nina and her obsessive admiration? His revenge relationship with Jane? Or Chris, who claims to be one of his lovers? We hope you enjoy it. Nina was yet another teenager who would have to spend Valentine's Day alone. She threw herself on the bed, sighing. She was exhausted after an afternoon of hard work. She put her laptop on her legs and started to check out her social media. Everyone's statuses were filled with heart emojis, photos of hugs, and mushy phrases. Seeing that made her sick, and it's not like she gets sick easily. But suddenly, she realized the stabbing she was feeling in her stomach was due to something different. Or rather, someone different. She searched the profile of a boy named Jeffrey Woods. She opened the chat tab, and there they were, dozens of messages written by her with no response from Jeffrey. She felt very sad, and a tear started to go down her cheek. She wiped the tear using a corner of the blanket, but then she realized she had stained her cheek with blood. The blood came from the body of a girl that laid by her side, just as if she were a horror doll. Nina casually set aside the body with a kick. It fell on the floor face down, revealing several stabbings on her back. Filled with gloom, Nina looked at the splashes of blood on the wall, as well as an inscription written in blood that said, "Sleep with me, my love." That was another message for the same recipient. Nina looked back at the chat window and hesitated about writing yet another message. Outside of the house, Jeff was crouching while he observed Nina laying on the bed. He had been following her lately and was having a great time observing her massacres. It really seemed the pupil was besting the master. It was awesome how with just a couple of knife movements she entered the parents in the living room. And the way she savagely stabbed that girl in the back? You could tell that Nina had the same spirit and bloodlust as Jeff. Maybe he was starting to feel something for her? The vibration on his phone interrupted his thoughts. He had a new message from Nina Hopkins. He observed her again, laying on the bed, typing on her laptop, and the smile in his whitish face turned more marked and evil. He stood up and went away from that place while answering the message on his phone. Evening came and Jeff arrived at the doorsteps of a small restaurant in the outskirts. He covered his head with his hood. He looked at the entrance. It was filled with pompous decorations with hearts and cupids everywhere, with a sign that said, "Today, a special Valentine's Day dinner." That made him feel sick, as he strongly held a knife he had hidden under his hoodie. His lust for killing increased, and he put his eye on a woman in the side alley. It was most likely one of the employees taking out the trash. He was about to rush towards her, but managed to contain himself. There would be enough time for that later. But for now, he was waiting for someone else. In the alley, Eve threw some trash bags into the trash container while dreading the several work hours she still had before her. That was the date she hated the most in the entire year. The hypocrisy, the unnecessary spending, the ridiculousness of it all. And all for people to go back to arguing and yelling at each other the next day, showing their true selves. Moreover, her boss required her to wear that embarrassing pink uniform, smile at all times, and congratulate the customers. When she came back into the restaurant, for a moment she reveled in the idea of grabbing one of the knives in the kitchen and venting off all of her frustration by becoming the author of the biggest Valentine's Day massacre in history. But that was just dark humor, she told herself. She would never do something like that. When she was heading back to the kitchen, she saw a couple of young people come into the restaurant, a couple of creepy and weird teenagers. As soon as Jeff and Nina went in, a waiter stopped them and asked them if they had a reservation. Jeff said, "Of course, here it is." And with a swift movement, Jeff sliced the throat of the waiter, stopping him from uttering another word. "Huh, we can sit whatever we want. Thank you. Here, have a tip," said Jeff as he proceeded to stab the waiter in the gut, finally ending his suffering. Jeff and Nina gave a quick glance to the half a dozen tables occupied with couples who were having a romantic dinner. Jeff told Nina, "What do you think, my love? You go for the ones on the right and I go for the ones on the left?" Nina responded, I'd rather go for the ones on the left because that's the side where the heart is." And thus, with knives in hand, Jeff and Nina quickly pounced over their victims. The first couples died practically without realizing what was going on. The next ones were unable to react, paralyzed in fear due to such a macabre show. The last couples had a small chance to escape, but Jeff and Nina quickly cut them off, making it impossible for them to run away. Jeff's and Nina's synchronization as a couple of killers was truly lethal. When they had finally killed all of the couples, a deadly silence filled the place. The two of them looked at each other's eyes and she decided to get closer and kiss him. But Jeff stopped her in the last moment. "Honey, wait! We're not done yet." Nina nodded, trying to hide her embarrassment. Then the two killers split up to finish the job. Jeff went towards the kitchen and Nina went to the toilets. When Nina got into the women's toilet, she saw how all of the stalls were empty except for one. She remained very still, attentively listening in silence, until she heard someone gasping. She rushed towards the occupied stall, opening the door with a kick, and found a female cook curled inside and paralyzed in terror. In a very sly way, Nina said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know it was occupied." In the kitchen, Jeff looked around carefully, but didn't see anybody. He turned away to leave the kitchen, but all of a sudden, Eve came out of her hiding place under a cabinet. And armed with a kitchen knife, rushed towards Jeff and stabbed him in the shoulder. Jeff fell on the floor, and Eve quickly searched for something to finish him off, but her time was not enough. Witnessing what had happened, Nina furiously rushed into the kitchen and knocked down Eve, making Eve hit her head and fall unconscious. "Whoa, another sourpuss who hates Valentine's Day, huh? It is because you don't have someone to spend it with?" Nina and Jeff looked at each other with passion once again. "Maybe a change of look might help her find someone," said Nina while pointing at a bottle of bleach in a cabinet. When Jeff saw it, he looked at Nina with a hopeful smile. Minutes later, when policemen arrived, they witnessed what can only be described as a macabre show. Everyone present in the restaurant had been savagely killed. Only a waitress had survived, who now had several burns on her face. On each table, the corpses of the couples remained seated, with their hearts extracted from their chests and put close together on the table. On the wall, there was a message written in blood that said, "Now go to sleep, lovers." The Richardsons were a normal family. They had been in the same neighborhood their whole life. Their house had been passed on from generation to generation. The young Jane Richardson was tired of her quiet life. Always the same story. Nothing exciting ever happened in that town. One day, while she was daydreaming looking out the window, she saw a minivan full of stuff parked at the front of the house opposite the road. Nobody had lived there since old Mr. Johnson died years earlier. New neighbors! She saw a young guy with pale skin and brown hair coming out of the car. He was wearing a t-shirt with black and white stripes. Behind him, she saw another guy, a bit younger. He looked her age. They were pretty cute, actually. "Jane, dinner is ready!" The next morning, Jane went downstairs for breakfast in her pajamas, and her mother told her the Woods had just moved. They had 2 boys and they would go to her same high school. Her mom always knew what was going on around them. Jane took longer to get ready that day. She brushed her hair carefully, put on her favorite skirt and knee-high socks. She waited at the door for a couple of minutes to see if the 2 brothers were coming as well. But when she checked the time, she realized she was late, so she left running. When she arrived, Jeff was already there, sitting at the end of the class. He looked sad, looking out the window with lost eyes. She wanted to approach him and talk to him, but the bell rang and the class started. At lunchtime, Jeff didn't move from the chair. Jane wanted to introduce herself, but her friends dragged her into the dining hall. "Hey, Michael hasn't invited me to the dance. Can you believe it? Has anybody asked you already?" Jane wasn't paying attention to Stacy. She was thinking about the new boy. "Hello, are you listening? This is important." "Yeah, sorry. I'm sure he'll ask you soon." She didn't want to keep talking about the St. Valentine's dance. She still didn't have a partner to go with. She walked down the hallway. At the end of it, she saw Jeff putting something inside his locker, looking sad. When she went back home after the cheerleaders' practice, it was almost night. It was pouring rain and she didn't have an umbrella. She walked with her black boots, trying not to step on the puddles. But then, when she turned around the corner, she found a violent situation. Jeff was laying on the ground and his nose and his lips were bleeding. His clothes were soaked and dirty, with mud and blood. Next to him, Randy, Troy, and Jake were trying to find money on his backpack.
What the fuck is this? He's only got shit in here. We should beat him so he learns to carry valuable things with him. I'm getting wet because of this moron. Let's go home, Randy.
Randy kicked him one last time in the abdomen before they left. Jane ran towards him and helped him get up, holding Jeff's head with her arms. His eyes were closed. It looked like he had fainted. When she looked at his face, Jane thought he was sweet and cleaned the blood from his face. "Are you okay? Does it hurt a lot?" Jeff half opened his eyes and stared at her. His penetrating look made Jane blush. She felt butterflies inside her tummy and her heart started beating intensely. The sound of the rain was interrupted by Jeff's soft voice.
I'm better than ever,
he finally said with a smile on his face. She smiled back at him. He sat up, still dazed, with his hands on the stomach where they had kicked him.
I'm Jeff Woods.
I'm Jane, your neighbor. Nice to meet you. Jeffrey Woods is gonna be mine, she thought.
Thanks for your help, Jane. If you need anything, you can ask me for help.
Then, Jane had an idea. She remembered that stupid St. Valentine's dance. The date was getting closer and she still hadn't found anyone to go with. Going alone would be a disaster, and even though she was embarrassed to ask, she gathered all her courage. "You could come with me to the dance, if you don't have a partner already, of course." Jeff accepted, a bit surprised. After this, they became inseparable. Jane loved being with sweet Jeff. When they were not together, she liked to look at him through the window. The days went by and the night of the dance arrived. Jeff was very handsome with his black suit and his red bow tie. The color matched his pale skin and made him look very attractive. Jane was nervous. She was wearing a red sequin dress and black high heel shoes. They danced all night as if the rest of the people didn't exist. She was leaning on his shoulder and he was holding her waist, until finally they melted into a magical kiss. Suddenly, Randy and his friends appeared. They took Jeff outside and Jane ran after them. The boys wanted to beat him up. Jeff got furious and a sadistic smile and look appeared on his face. He ended up killing 2 of them. Randy, scared, spread alcohol and bleach around him and set him up on fire. Jane felt helpless with the whole situation. She grabbed her phone and called the police right before she passed out. She woke up at the hospital with her parents and she asked, "What happened? Is Jeff alright? Don't ever talk to that kid again. We forbid you from seeing him again," her mom said. "But Mom, Jeff is special. You don't understand." "Enough, Jane. This is the end of the conversation." Jane, not listening to her parents, escaped and looked for him in every room of the hospital. She found him with a bandage around his head. "What happened to your beautiful face?" But it didn't matter what Jeff looked like now. She would still love him. Once recovered, they went back home. Even though Jane was banned from talking to him, she continued watching him through the window, and she realized he was acting weirder and weirder. It's like it's not him anymore. That terrifying smile never leaves his face. Maybe he forgot about me. One night, Jane woke up to the sound of the door. She went downstairs and found a note in the kitchen that said,
I haven't forgot about you. Nobody will take us apart.
Jane, scared, grabbed a sharp knife. She went to the dining room where she found her parents sitting at the table, dead, and a terrible, disfigured Jeff waiting for her. His hair used to be brown but was now black. His eyelids were burned, his mouth cut, and he had the same sadistic look he had when he fought with Randy. Jane screamed, disconsolate.
Look who has finally woken up. Why that face, Jane? They had to go to sleep. Don't worry. I'll make you look as beautiful as me.
What do you do, Jeff? Are you crazy? How could you? I will kill you, whatever it takes. Jeff wasn't Sweet Jeff anymore. He had turned into Jeff the Killer. He spread gasoline and bleach around Jane and set the house on fire. When Jane woke up, she was at the hospital again. Her head hurt. A nurse told her her family had been killed during the fire. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she got frightened. Her face was completely burnt. Later, Jane got a package with a mask inside, a bunch of black roses and a sharp knife. There was also a note.
Jane, I'm sorry you don't look as beautiful as me, but now we will be together eternally.
From that day on, she swore she'd take revenge on the treason of killing her family. How dare that damned Jeff take her loved ones from her? Jane's motto is the contrary of Jeff's. Don't go to sleep. To get in the way of Jeff trying to do the same to more innocent victims. However, when the time comes, will Jane be capable of getting rid of the strong feeling she has towards Jeff and perpetrate her revenge? Her best friend, her first love. Will they be together again, or is it just an illusion of a sadist in love? My name is Chris, and I want to explain how I got the last name, The Killer. I had a very normal life, but a clumsiness changed everything in just a few seconds. I was at home with my two best friends, Sam and Jessica, watching a horror movie. We had been reading scary stories all day, so when it got dark, the three of us were already very scared. Suddenly, we wanted more popcorn, so I went to the kitchen to make it. While there, I noticed how someone from behind was holding my arms very tightly. Out of sheer survival instinct, I grabbed what was closest to hand, that is, the frying pan, and slammed back. But then I heard a scream and turned around. I had hit Jessica, and she was lying on the ground with a lot of blood pouring out of her head. I bent down to check how she was, but it was too late for everything. She had died. At that moment, Sam came running into the kitchen and saw the terrible scene. She looked at me scared, and I tried to explain that it was just an accident, but we were both too nervous. My parents would be there any minute, so we had to act fast. We decided to hide the corpse of our friend. We wrapped it in a garbage bag and took it to the garbage can. Very nervous, we went back home. We could barely speak, so we just walked side by side. After a while, my parents came home and asked where Jessica was. We told them that she had already gone home, and they left the room as if nothing had happened. We breathed in relief, but we didn't forget what I had done. Sam went home and we met the next day. We met to talk about what happened and to clarify what we were going to say to the people. We decided to continue with the lie as if nothing had happened. Now I know it was a complete mistake. That same day, my mother asked us about Jessica again. She hadn't returned home and her parents were looking for her. The days passed and I couldn't deal with the guilt. I was unable to sleep or eat. At school, everyone offered us their support, invited us for walks, and consoled us. And I couldn't stop repeating to myself over and over again, it was an accident, I didn't want to. Time continued to pass and my mental state did not improve. The nightmares with Jessica were constant and I had hardly any life anymore. And then my father told me that we had to talk. They had found Jessica's body and her mother had recognized her. They had also performed an autopsy and this had revealed that her death was due to a brain injury. At that moment, the investigation began to find out who had hit her. They questioned many people until a neighbor said that she had seen 2 young people leave her house with a huge bundle. That's when my end began. I testified that it was just trash, but they took samples from us and certified that our DNA was in Jessica's body. One morning, several policemen came to my house to arrest me. They said that I had to spend 3 years in a reformatory until I was over 18, and from there to a jail. All that if I passed the psychiatric exams. But I wasn't willing to go to jail for a mistake. I decided to grab a few pieces of clothing and run away. When the policeman knocked the door of my room down, I jumped out of the window. I had a knife hidden in my backpack, and even though I had injured my ankle, I kept running. The policemen were chasing me by car, but surprisingly, when I reached a wooded area, a hand grabbed my arm and helped me hide. That was the first day I saw Jeff the killer. Since then, I love him. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode.